Okay, we're on. Well, as everyone knows by now, Mark Levitt's a regular here, comes every month, so we don't have to get involved with a lot of introductions. So, Mark, I'm just going to hand it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you, Gary. I appreciate that. Happy Halloween, everybody. And actually, before I even get started, it looks like Amy's got a question. Oh, never mind. She forgot her question, or remembered she didn't have one. Anyway, happy Halloween. And what I thought I'd do today is just go over some spooky words. Words that are spooky that are actually attractive. Spooky words that us in our unique field are actually attracted to. And the first spooky word is actually the word that got me interested in this in the first place. And that word is impermanence. And the reason I say this is the word that got me into this in the first place is because the first book on Buddhism that I ever read was called The Tibetan Book of Living and Dying by Sogyal Rinpoche. And it came at the recommendation of my Eastern philosophy professor. I just taken a liking for Eastern philosophy and asked for a book recommendation. So after getting that book, first introduction to Buddhism whatsoever, the very first chapter, they hit me with this paragraph that says, and the paragraph was, or the chapter was impermanence. And the paragraph just said, the only guarantee that you have in life is that every single thing that you care for, you're going to lose. Every investment that you have, every single thing that you build, you're going to lose. And I've never been hit with that much honesty. No one had ever leveled with me that directly with me before. As anyone knows, I'm not really familiar with religion. I grew up in a non-practicing Jewish family. So I really didn't know anything about religion, but what I saw superficially about religion, just from TV and talking to people, it didn't seem like anybody was leveling with you. It all seemed so foreign. It all seemed so distant. It all seemed so, what do you call it? Not relating to life, not relevant. Yeah, everything in religion seemed to be not relevant. But when I read that chapter about impermanence and just leveling with you that the only guarantee that you have in life is that you are going to lose everything. That's it. It's the only thing you can guarantee on. I was hit. I was struck by that word impermanence. And obviously impermanence is also, and let me make sure, I want to make sure it's not one of the other scary words I want to come up to. It's just another word for nothingness or emptiness. That's what all these words are at the center of. It is just nothingness, whether it's selflessness, nothingness, impermanence. That was the introduction, and that was the scary thing that was exciting of someone telling you at the very center of everything was just nothingness, but not even in that word. Like I said, the word was impermanence, which takes us to the second word. The second word is how that word made me feel when I read that paragraph about impermanence. Hey, Kirk, good to see you. And so that word is groundlessness. The second spooky word for me is groundlessness. And that's the feeling that it left me with, a feeling of just having no foundation to rest your feet, to rest yourself, to rest your sense of self, no certainty. And like I said, nothing else had prepared you for this. No other system or religion or anything pointing you towards anything, for me, in my experience, had never pointed me to the experience of just pure groundlessness, of just being suspended in space with nothing to rest on, nothing to rest our feet on, nothing to rest your beliefs on, nothing to. And that also reminded me of the wisdom of insecurity, because that's what it really is not trying to secure yourself. It's not insecurity in the sense of being insecure. Actually, I thought about the title of Alan Watts' book. That's why I said the wisdom of insecurity. It's really just being cute. but it's the wisdom of not trying to secure something that can't be secured. Coming from the word I just, coming from the word we're about to go to, which is the ungraspable. But going back to the no ground thing, for me, that's why when we start with impermanence, I brought it back to the sense of selflessness or nothingness. Because if you notice, every single one of these words are going to have that ground of nothingness to it. It's that, or selflessness, depending upon which way you look at it. That's the center of all, that's the commonality between all these words. They don't give you a ground to rest on. Specifically, the word selfless takes you to the point that now it becomes personal or impersonal, in the sense that at first the discovery could be impersonal because you're just seeing impermanence and you're not, I mean, let's face it, when you first think about things, you're thinking about the world and everything else. So when you first think about impermanence, your natural thing is just to think about others. So the impermanence of the world, the impermanence of losing others. But then all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, but after, you know, a time maturing in the permanence, in the groundlessness, that's when that's when all of a sudden it comes down to the, wait a second, this also means selflessness, this nothingness, this impermanence, this groundlessness also pertains to here. There's nothing here. Not only is there nothing there, there's also nothing here. So it's basically the same realization, just deepening, ripening, spreading. The same realization, just spreading more territory. The same bright white light, the same, like a flashlight, the same white light flashing on a target, but just widening and covering more. Covering more, the same nothingness, the same impermanence, but spreading from there's nothing there, there's nothing here, nothing there, nothing here. So the third word, the spooky word, being selfless, selflessness, the experience of selflessness. What I wrote down is what you discover is the endless succession of observers when you look for the self. So when you look for the self, you only find observing. But then if you back up, you can see there's actually a subtle observing of that observing. What you're really seeing is at the arising of any object is simultaneously the rising of the witness, because the witness only arises with the objects. So even when you notice the observer, when you back up, you could say even that is something you could observe, the sense of being a witness or the sense of being an observer. And you could just keep backing up in an endless succession of a sense of observers that ultimately just ends up in a sense of just pure dissolving, or black hole that just churns everything up. That's why I always refer back to this picture. That's the black hole. The more you back up, the more you're just backing up into that black hole, and it just dissolves. Even the sense of the witness, even the sense of observing, just an endless success, an endless horizon, basically, an endless horizon of observing. All right, and that takes us to the fourth word. And after this, like I said, I got it broken up into parts. So after this word, I'll break for questions. But the fourth spooky word that naturally falls in place from this selflessness is what we hinted at before, was the ungraspable. So the fourth word is the ungraspable. And the reason that we find the word ungraspable so spooky is because that points to the ultimate unknowable, I guess the unknowableness of everything. And what I mean by that is, you notice that anything that you could say is true and simultaneously not true. There's nothing you could say that's unequivocally true. Everything is true and simultaneously not true. It is in the focus of the second book that I have is it is and it isn't. And it wasn't until much later that I realized that it was that intuition that I focused on about anything that I noticed that you could say is true, it also simultaneously is not true. I noticed when I finally discovered Nagarjuna, that was really just a watered down version or a watered down intuition of his truth, which is the same thing. There's anything that you could say that is, it's not that it is or it isn't, but he went even further. It's not just that it is and it isn't, it's neither both is and it isn't, or neither is and it isn't. But either way, all of these things are just keep pointing you back to the ungraspable. It's not that it is, and it's not that it isn't. It's not that it both is and it isn't. It's not that it's either. All these things are just pointing you back to the ungraspable space, the unknowable, the unclingable. And I'll give you an example of that. Someone like me heavily relies on the word of aware space, always relying on the word of pointing to aware space. All my words right now are happening in aware space. But when you practice this, when you notice the ungraspable, you see there's not even aware space. There's not even mind. There's not even self. Anything that you could come up with, even that's not it. And that's the ungraspable. You can't even settle on anything, any type of isness, any type of ground, any type of actual foundation that you want to try to impugn on it is not intrinsically there. And it's just our making. It's ultimately ungraspable. And the reason that's so scary for us is because it reminds us of sort of selflessness. That's the death of the self. You're experiencing the death of the self. And that's why I titled the third chapter of the first book, The Suicide Mission, because that's exactly what it feels like when you engage that void. When you keep backing up to notice what encompasses everything, including the sense of you, it feels like you're backing up into death. It feels the more you back up your attention, it feels like you're backing up into death, because all the void is just pure dissolving. It's all it's capable of. It's not anything itself, just dissolving, just the act of dissolving. All right, so before we go to the next part, I'll go ahead and take a break here. I don't like to go too much without taking questions or having anybody else talk. Does anybody have any comments about that? About either impermanence, the groundlessness, the selflessness, or the ungraspable?
Hey, Mark, there's a question in the chat from Cliff. He's about to go into a tunnel. What he wrote in the chat as a question is, what about the observer is the observed? Yeah, he's in the subway. He can't talk.
That's beautiful.
No. The observer is the observed.
Yes, go ahead, Cliff.
Yeah, I'm saying when you're talking about that, the observer is the observed.
Yes.
It's one.
Cliff, you're frozen. You're frozen.
Hey, that's all right though. We could expand on what he just said based on what he just said, because I believe what he just said, observer of the observer. And that's the same thing as what I call aware space is awareness of awareness. So yeah, it's the same concept. It's the same concept of all there is awareness, and awareness has no choice but to be aware. And since there's nothing else to be aware of, awareness would naturally bend to be attracted to itself, creating the appearance of two. And that's what this is. This is the multiplicity. This is the appearance of duality, the appearance of two, the myriad things. So yes, even, and that's so that's why the void, which is basically the no self, and that's why we have to really be liberal with our words, because if you look at Ramana Maharshi or people that come from the Advaita background, they would say the opposite. They would say the only thing that exists is the self. So if we take that language, saying all there exists is the self, we would say all that exists is the self down here, but the self is attracted to itself, creating the appearance of two. So it's still the same dynamic, the appearance of the singularity, whether that singularity you want to call the self, or the singularity you call the mind or aware space. Basically just the dynamic is that singularity, because it is the singularity, there's nothing else to be aware of. So the singularity would, like a black hole, be attracted to itself, implode on itself like a black hole, giving the appearance of two. So going back to what Cliff said, you could jump in anytime you want, Cliff, now. That's the observer of the observer, that's mirroring the original dynamic of awareness of awareness. And it may sound contradictory to say, how could awareness be aware of awareness? But what else could awareness be aware of? It could be awareness of awareness as something else. And that's the third thing. So basically, this is the triune, by the way. That's what my third is based on, is the triunistic muscle of reality. So here you have the singularity be what it is. And then this bending part, it'd be what it does. So the does part is, what is awareness? What is it? So the essence is what it is. So what is it? Its nature is awareness, or space, aware space, let's say. Focus on the space aspect, the aspect of capacity, the aspect of just being. And then the nature of aware space is obviously to be aware. So that activity of aware, being the singularity, since it has nothing else to be aware of, would naturally invaginate like a black hole and become aware of itself, creating the appearance of awareness as the world. So it's not necessarily awareness of awareness, it's awareness of awareness as something else. So one of those something else's could be the sense of an observer. And it's not going to be something you ever experience until you practice what we're practicing. When you watch the mind and you back up, then you're going to notice that the observer, and that's why I was careful to say the sense of observing or the sense of witnessing only arises with the objects. There's no sense of observing or witnessing until the objects arrive with it, along with it. So, and Boris, good to see you again. So yes, what's your question? You can help me out, Boris.
Let me try. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir, I hear you good.
Yeah, I was interested in, two of the words. One was impermanence and the other was the unknowability. Unknowability seems to me to sort of be the relaxation, into just what is, so to speak. So there's no conjuring up, either a person or a self or any conglomeration of things, nor any kind of universal everythingness, in which something would happen, because those seem to be constructs or things, right? However subtle or whatever you might say they are. So unknowability feels to me to be the just the, if you want to call it a state, the natural state, so to speak, of just everythingness or whatever. And so I'm just curious, when I hear models of how things work, they seem to me to fall into the category of the realm of understanding or knowing, or some explanation of things. And my experience is that the idea of explaining anything can fall away itself. And so to me, there's a little bit of it feels like a little bit of a contradiction, right? The idea of a model of explanation and the sort of sense of unknowability, that there is, let's say, nothing to know, or impossibility of knowing, or irrelevance of knowing something.
Thank you. And two things I want to say. But since I have the first one written down, I'll address the second one since it's still in my brain. Hold on, let me gather my thoughts for a second. I'm trying to explain it, trying to put it into words. Yes, and the difficulty is anytime trying to explain something or trying to put it into words. But I wanted to thank you because what you introduced a word that is actually my favorite word that puts all this into context. What you started off saying was relaxing into, and that's exactly the way I see it. Because when you say the words relax into, what I hear is a sense of continuing, not a sense of beginning, not a sense of a beginning, but a sense of continuing, a sense of something already being there and you continuing it rather than starting something new. So I really appreciate you bringing that word relaxing into it. So going back to the point about the methods, I had a thought about that. Oh yes, this is or explanations. Yes, when you said explanations, the reason I thought we have explanations, the reason it's natural for us to have explanations is because at some point you have to account for appearances. That's why I realized we have these concepts, is because the truth is, as you know, nothing exists. There's nothing here, but yet this appears. And then this is why we have to, the burden is to explain the world, yet to account for the world. Because nothing exists, there's no self, there's no world, there's nothing here, yet here we are, appearances. And so that's why I think explanations exist. That's why I think concepts exist, because the truth contradicts what actually appears. And that's where, at least for me, and that was, like I said, with everybody, my particular last holding on was understanding. And it doesn't have to be for everybody. For somebody else, it could be a fear of the self. It could be a fear of, letting go. It could be anything. For me, it was an understanding. So it doesn't have to be that way for anybody, but for me to ultimately let go, for me, an understanding was important, because going back to what Boris said, in my mind, I had to account for the myriad things. I intuitively, at this point, I had experiences of emptiness and knowing, but yet the world was still there and I couldn't account for it. And there was just a needling in me that doesn't necessarily even have to exist for everybody. Everybody is going to, and that's why, incidentally, that's why there's countless yogas. The yoga that we would be interested in, and I don't even know, I guess this would be the Hindu path, would be and help me with my pronunciation here, somebody, but the Jnani path of yoga, the Jnani, that's the path of understanding. But so yoga would mean the universe or union with the infinite. But there's lots of paths. You have the Hatha yoga, the Karma yoga, the Karma yoga, the what's it called, Bhakti yoga, the Jnana yoga or Jnana yoga, however you pronounce it. So I get that there's infinite paths, but the path that people are attracted to mostly, I think, at least when they're in non-duality, is also specifically the path of understanding. So just out of curiosity, Boris, did I answer your question or did I just muddy things up more?
I think what I heard was that the drive or desire for understanding was sort of what led you to unfold things, and maybe the relaxation happened as a result of this seeking and trying to resolve a question.
Absolutely. I like that. And again, I like how you bring it right back to the relaxing, right back. And by the way, the reason I like that, right back to the relaxing, especially back to what Boris was talking about, is the word enlightenment is a very general word. You could get enlightened to, a new pizza or a new thing in town. It's something that enlightens an area that was darkened. So it's a very general word. For me, when I refer to the word enlightenment in the first book, it was only specifically the sense of seeking, the sense of trying to complete myself, the sense of seeking, just generally speaking. So the only thing I mean when I speak of the word enlightenment was just the seeking ended. That's it. Oh, and going back to what Boris said, the reason I thought about that was the relaxing. Until then, I could not relax. I had many experiences. I understood, my emptiness, my own selflessness, but I did not understand how the one manifests as the many. And so I could not relax. And so I appreciate Boris pointing that out, because that's all that happened, was that because of the experience that I had, after that left a, what do you call it? An unequivocal experience, that the only permanent thing that it left was the unpermanent feeling of trying to seek anything, or trying to add anything, or trying to modify anything. And that's it. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. The only reason that it struck me is just because, when we're talking about trying to know something or understand something, there can be this notion that it will reveal the so-called truth, and then you will know. Now you will know the truth, and that's the whole point, is to find something out. And my experience is that has nothing to do with anything other than to move, this character towards a seeming character, towards a seeming something that allows them to see that it was all sort of, folly, so to speak. But it can be easy to get very, you could say, attached or fixated or stuck to the notion of I just need to know. There's more to know, and there's a truth, and that once I have the truth, but there's nothing to have. There's no answer at the end of the road, so to speak.
Yes, and to take it further, what I think you're saying is ultimately there is no truth. That's the truth because you're right. I can't pinpoint the truth. I can't express the truth. I mean, I rely on words like aware space and bending and folding and things like that. And so the truth that I simply experienced was just the experience. And actually, it's not even the addition of anything else. It was the subtraction. It was the subtraction of the sense of self and other. And that's it. Nothing else was added. Something was lost. Something was flattened out. Something was actually taken away. But I wanted to go back to something Boris said. About the truth. And what he was getting at too is there is no truth that I could speak of. The truth is just the experience. The truth is this. The truth is what is, which I put words on it, like aware space and nothingness and all the words I've gone through so far, the ungraspable. But the reason I want to keep coming back to that is because it only gets deeper and deeper. That experience in my book that I talked about was 20 years ago. The experience of enlightenment was 20 years ago, and it only gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And so whatever truth you ever, if I would have put a word on it, if I even did try to say whatever the truth was, it's constantly evolving in the sense of that white light covering more ground. So it's the same white light of truth just expanding and covering more ground. So that same truth just matures because the same truth is just coming from the original seed. The original seed is, and like I said, for whatever word you want to pick, nothingness, selflessness, emptiness, whatever is at the pure, whichever one of those words you want to consider the first word to birth all of these words, that is the seed from which everything springs and then what everything falls back into. But I really want to hone in on what Boris was talking about, because he's absolutely right. There is no truth. There is no single thing. All right, here you go. And one of my favorite expressions in Zen is open mouth, already a mistake. But you have to say something. So for me, actually, though, that is the truth. And that's why I want to say, if anything, the word I'm using now lately is just the dissolving. Like when if you really just want to be like because also we could use the word truth in a lot of different ways. What I find myself wanting to do, the way I convey, the way I talk, is not really going for, because like I said, truth is a big word. Specifically, what I notice in my mind, what I'm going for is not necessarily truth, but accuracy. Specifically accuracy. Trying to use my words, and we're all human beings, we're having these same experiences, and trying to dig up the same word that's going to try to create that, same experience that I'm experiencing.
Yes.
And that's why accuracy. Oh, go ahead, Boris.
Yeah,
go
I
ahead.
was just going to say what struck me was just that I appreciate the clarification, because it can knowing or understanding something, truth seeking, it feels like it can be a process of gathering, right? And
Yes.
it sounds like what you're talking about is trying to satisfy something that feels like it's unsatisfied, in order to let go of things rather than picking more up. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And like I said, it's easy for me to say that now that I'm satisfied. You know what I mean? So I get both ways. I completely understand the need for understanding. That's my path. But ultimately, the only understanding that you ever come to is knowing you can't ever understand anything, is knowing that the understanding that you're going to come to is just this. How could you understand that? It's the void. It's devoid of understanding. It chews up anything as it's arising anyway. So it's contradictory to actually the word of understanding, but that is the understanding of being okay in that suspended state of groundlessness, of no ground, groundlessness. And that's why for me, I love Nagarjuna more than anything, because all those pointers, when he keeps specifically saying it's not this and it's not that, and it's not even both not this or not that or neither not that, it leaves you nowhere to go. And it just leaves you with that, with no foundation to rest on, that sense of groundlessness. And for me, that's equivalent to the truth. That's what we could call the truth, because there's nothing truth, but the only truth is that groundlessness. The truth eats up truth in the moment of truth. That's why I like I was given this analogy of this analogy to my wife last night. Like, I see reality as like a jar, an empty jar, and you put a firefly in there. There's emptiness, and every once in a while, in a random spot, that emptiness will glow light. It'll appear from emptiness, and it'll go right back into emptiness. And a moment later, it will flick up some other random spot. Light will appear in the emptiness and dissolve it into emptiness. And that's it. And so any knowing is just knowing you can't know anything, and knowing that's the knowing. Knowing that all the knowing is anything you can know is getting chewed up in the unknowing. The unknowing is the knowing. Actually, thank you, Boris. You just took me on a trip to make me realize the only knowing that I know is the unknowing. That is the knowing. Knowing the unknowing. And knowing you don't know the unknowing. Relaxing into the unknowing, that's the knowing. The only knowing that I could share is just relaxing into the unknowing. Whatever. I think we're going around in circles there. Anything to add before I move on to that, Boris?
No, and I didn't mean to sidetrack you. I appreciate it because it helps me sort of frame or understand where you're coming from, because a lot of this modeling stuff can seem, it's sort of like trying to explain the imaginary, right?
It
It's
is.
like so anything that's explaining the imaginary is still in the realm of the imaginary and isn't pointing you to a so-called reality. It's still the constructed. So yeah, thanks, Mark.
No, thank you. And thank you for once again bringing in another one of my favorite words, imaginary. I often use imaginary as a, what do you call it? A simile or a word for this, for the aware space. I could equally insert the word imagination just to say all there is imagination. That's all there is imagination. Anything that's ever happened is pure imagination. Anything you've ever experienced is imagination. Anything you've ever seen, everything happens in the sphere of imagination. Because as awareness, the only thing awareness is capable of doing is imagining. So any function is only imagining. So thanks, Boris. You gave me a lot of food to feed on, food for thought. Thank you, Boris.
Either way is fine. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. Okay, Gary, you got a question, or you got a question for somebody else?
No, I have a comment because
Yeah.
of what Boris said. The good and what you said, your interaction with Boris sprung this thought or whatever, and that is the good news is when you get to that, let's call it, get to the place of relaxation where you can let all these things go. What can I know? What can't I know? Because this came up in yesterday's meetup. Like, oh, how can we do it? Well, when you get to the point of relaxation where all that stuff just becomes kind of like, irrelevant, then that's when I think the appreciation of, let's call it, the 10,000 things can come in, because now you can see it's all. You can see it in the context of entertainment, like the firefly going off in different spots. You don't have to understand it, but you can be very entertained by it. So that's, I think that was good that kind of Boris led, and you and Boris led into that, whatever we want to call it, that observation that, hey, I don't have to understand things or know things or that, but I can certainly be entertained and participate in the entertainment.
Yeah. Absolutely. And also providing yourself the opportunity to surrender without understanding, without having to grasp something. Especially if you find yourself locked in, purely conceptual thoughts of, free will or choice, or is there this? All those are just excuses for your mind to stay thinking, to stay up here instead of relaxing into what is. Because that's all there is relaxing into what is. And so your mind knows you more than anything. And so, like I said, my mind knew me more than anything. And that's why it picked up with me to pick on this one thing of understanding, and it picked at me and it left me unsatisfied. So I was unable to relax. But your mind knows you, and it's going to pick on you in a different way. And so anytime that you can leave it alone, whatever your mind is trying to solve, whatever concept is trying to do, having the opportunity to be able to surrender before you try to solve it, that's the practice itself right there. That's the practice of non-attachment, to letting it go. So oh yeah, and that's funny because that was the word that we left off on, the ungraspable. And so basically, now we're just getting down to basic wisdom, because when we see that everything is ungraspable, that's why the big word becomes non-attachment. That becomes the operative word, because if everything is at its essence ungraspable, then the most wisest way to operate within that reality would be to be non-attached, because the essence of things are ungraspable. Which brings me back to a concept I've been trying to share over the last weeks, is trying to put it in the context of a game, by pointing out to people that in the world there's two games. There's the seen game and there's the unseen game. So if we were to, let's say, have a scoreboard on top of like if anybody's played a video game, you got a scoreboard. The scoreboard on the seen part is what, as a consensual reality, what we deem to be winning. Whether we're winning arguments, ding, ding, you win a point. Whether you won looking good over the other person, ding, ding, you get a point. Whether you won, let's say getting something over somebody else, ding, ding, you get a point. So what's the word I'm trying to say? Positioning yourself ahead of people, ding, 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 these always get you points. So we're going through the scene world where all of our interactions, people are racking up points because, I was right in the argument and you were wrong. You admitted that you were wrong, so I get a point, ding, ding. Or you got out of the way, we were both competing for the front seat and you acquiesced, so I got the point, I got my way. So on the surface, there seems to be a game of everyone's trying to get their way, and whoever got their way the most is going to have the most points. But so at the end of the world, you're going to die, and then you're going to find out those points meant nothing. All those things you got meant nothing. If anything, they were anchors to your experience. All they did was they caused you suffering, misunderstandings, unhappiness, unsatisfactory. All right, so those points got you nothing. And that's why people keep playing the game over and over again, because they keep playing the same game of, okay, let me try to win. Let me try to win, and let me try to get the most, and let me try to beat you. And that becomes the game. And I want to have the biggest advantage and come out ahead here. That's the way I do it. That's the way I look at the world. How can I get the most of it? How can I win? All right, so that's the scene world. But in this video game that we're playing, there's actually an unseen scoreboard. And that scoreboard is based on you losing attachment. Simple as that. So it's a whole different game. Now, when you go through life, when you're interacting with people, every conversation is now motivated with, instead of how do I either win this conversation or how do I get the thing that me and you were arguing about, whether it be that chair that I want to sit in, or, I want to go on this door, whatever it is, I want to get my way. Instead of that being the motivation, you're playing a video game where your motivation is just to lose attachment. So you're finding yourself saying, oh, go ahead. Oh, go ahead. Oh, go ahead. Because that's the way you're winning your game. You're getting your points. So anybody that would be looking at it from a bird's eye view would be saying, look at that loser. He's not getting his way. He's not getting his way. He's not getting his way. He lost that interaction. He clearly lost that interaction. He clearly lost that interaction. Meanwhile, the other person's getting fat on their points, anchoring them down, and you're getting lighter because your practice, because the unseen game that you're playing is just non-attachment. So you're seeing through the world of how is this interaction, how is this dynamic, this situation going to lead to me being more non-attached. And like I said, it's a whole different scoreboard. And then at the end, now you've come to know something that the other people didn't get to know. You got to know the emptiness aspect of yourself. You got to know the unknowable aspect of yourself. You got to know the bendable part of yourself, the flexible part of yourself, the invisible part that they don't know. So anyway, just a little sidetrack, the ungraspable reminds me of that, of just valuing it, placing value on the ungraspable, on the unknowable. We don't place any value on the unknowable, on the ungraspable. But the more you relax into the unknowing, then you place value on it, because you're entering the place where you don't have to secure yourself. You're entering the place that you don't have to build yourself, defend yourself, or create or sustain yourself. I guess that's the general word, sustain yourself. And that's what relaxing is, the ending of the sustain, relaxing back. All right, so now we'll go into, I want to speed this up. I know we don't have all day, so I'll go through these a little bit quicker. So all of those, the reason I stopped there is the first four, I noticed those are kind of set in the ground. So these four words, impermanence, groundlessness, selflessness, and ungraspable, they set the they set the tone for the next set of words that I have. And this is the set of words of what your life is going to, what you're actually going to experience once you engage the ungraspable, once you engage the groundlessness, the selflessness. So once you engage these four things, or I call them four things, they're obviously all just selflessness. But once you engage these, then we come to the fifth word, the fifth spooky word, which is dying. Because that's what you experience. And that's why I called it the suicide mission, because when you engage these things, the scary word that you feel, that you experience, that you should experience, you know you're on target if you start to feel like you're dying, if it starts to feel scary, like I'm gonna disappear. That's it. Now, yeah, there you go. If your target is the void, then scary should mean you're there. You know you got your sights set right. So dying. So let me see my comment that I have about dying. Oh, yes. Okay. So what I wrote down was, now you see what they mean by dying before you die. And I wrote that down because I think that's a Christian concept. I've never heard of that concept, but after I had my experiences, that's what I thought. I was like, oh, now I understand what people mean by dying before you die, because you can experience the void, stillness of complete annihilation while you're still alive. And that experience of dying before you die just frees you up before you die. But anyway, that was the epiphany that I had. I was like, this is what people must mean when they're talking about dying before you die. A conscious death. That's the whole thing. What I talked about is that there's an inevitability to all this. I always talk about how enlightenment is not even really important because we're all going there anyway. And what I mean by that is nature seems to be sloped in the sense that we're always gravitating down, just like, if you're to pour water, just water finds its own level. So we're always getting sloped downwards. And the reason that it funnels in is because you'll find out, like, let's say up here, you have all these choices. Oh, I could do this. And you find out, nope, that doesn't work. Now there's limited choices. Nope, that causes suffering. That causes suffering. That's a mistake. So limited down, we're all getting whittled down to the singularity, which is selflessness. So all the different attempts of trying, let me try this, nothing works, until finally you get down to selflessness. And that's why I always say an enlightenment is not really even necessarily important, because there's only one direction, and that's the direction down the black hole. Life is teaching you, it's beating you down with suffering, with teaching you impermanence, with teaching you can't have it your way. You're not going to get it your way. And life is constantly beating you down. And when it's beating you down, it's taking you down to the singularity of selflessness. So how was I doing that? So when I talk about the suicide mission, all I'm talking about is just being conscious of this dynamic, being conscious of the fact that we're all sliding towards death in the singularity, and be conscious about it. That's why I called it the suicide mission, because when you engage in emptiness, when you engage in yourself and you look for yourself, you're going to find nothing. You're going to find the void, and the void is going to feel like death. It's going to feel like annihilation. So you have to that's why I called it the suicide mission, because you have to consciously engage your own death. You have to, it feels like you're the one pulling your own trigger on your own death the more you engage the void. Another thing that I wrote down about the dying is the sense of hopelessness and helplessness. Again, that's what this is about. You get to the bottom from becoming hopeless and helpless. That's why I love the fitting pictures of Jesus and Buddha, the two biggest spiritual figures we have. It's poetic and fitting that we have, let's take Buddha hopeless under the Bodhi tree because he gave up. That's the story of the Buddha. He was seeking enlightenment, seeking, and finally he just gave up. And the act of giving up was the act of enlightenment. He became hopeless. So I like to say as hopeless as the Buddha under the tree, or as helpless as Jesus on the cross. Those are the two biggest pictures that we have of the spiritual experiences of Jesus and the Buddha, and they're showing us hopelessness and helplessness because there's no other options. You're done. You got no hope. There's no choice. There's no way out of it. It's completely hopeless and it's completely, and the gift, the highest gift is only for the most hopeless, only for the most helpless. My favorite quote is by Rumi. He said the rich man would be jealous if he knew what the hopeless man had, if he knew what the helpless man had. It's only the hopeless, helpless man that knows the very bottom, the unknowable. So anyway, so going back to dying. So dying. And so now, again, remember I said all these scary words are progressive in nature. So the next scary, spooky word of dying is why. Then you have to think. So for me, the why of dying, why it's so scary, for me, the word that comes up for me is suffocating. That's the word that I wrote down. So the next spooky word is suffocating, because even the word dying, you have to answer, well, why is death scary? You have to examine it. And for me, the feeling that I was experiencing, when I'm talking about death, I'm talking about not my actual physical death in the future, the actual experience of feeling like you're dying when you're engaging the void, when you're actually experiencing the void, the actual feeling of dying. So not in the sense of your physical death, but just in the literal sense of dying. What it felt to me is suffocating. And that's the scary part. So it's not just enough to say death, is spooky. Why? And for me, the specific of death being scary was the feeling of suffocating, the feeling of, once again, it's ungraspability. We want to grasp, we want to have on, we want to have something. And the more you back up and the more you acknowledge that still silent aspect of yourself, it's going to feel like you're suffocating. It's going to feel like there's no oxygen in the room to support the fire. And it feels like suicide because you're doing it. You're actually engaging it. So suffocation would be the second scary word. And now all these words, as you're going to notice, these next set of words I'm going to go into, you can say they're all similes. You can say they're all the same words, but they're all subtle. And that's why I'm going to go through them all, because we have all these different words, the same reasons Eskimos have different words for snow, because there is a subtle different experience of these words. So the next word that I wrote down for a spooky word for Halloween is annihilation. After suffocation is annihilation. And that's continuing on the thread of why is dying scary? Why is dying scary? Because it feels suffocating. And where is this suffocating going? It's going towards my annihilation. That's where the suffocating is going. The direction of the suffocating is going to my total 100% annihilation. And that's real. That's totally real. And that's, again, why I call it the suicide mission. And that's why we experience the resistance to it, the fear to it. And it's completely natural. That's why we can't engage in that for too long. Okay. A note I want to have about that is that, this is getting to the good part. So that annihilation feeling, it's actually a doorway. So actually, I want to share an experience I had before I go, because this just reminded me of when I said this doorway. So I have a note to write about the annihilation feels like a doorway, and I'll tell you why. When I was, 25 years ago, when I was on a deep seeker on the seeking path, I was using a plant called Salvia divinorum. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of salvia. It's not popular. If you've ever heard of ayahuasca, it would be something similar to that, but the only difference would be it only lasts for 5 minutes. It's just an experience of death, of the end of the world, and it's a shaman's plant. So yeah, Salvia divinorum. Thank you, Gary. I appreciate that. But anyway, I had this experience that just reminded me. I was talking about annihilation of. Like death, what it feels like to die, because that's what everyone that takes this plant, it feels like you're dying. And that's why I did it, by the way, because I was really into Tibetan Buddhism and I was curious about death, and anything that offered me a practice to simulate death. I was going to the Monroe Institute, I was doing out-of-body experiences, lucid dreaming, anything. So this plant that simulated death, and by the way, Tibetan Buddhism has a heavy emphasis on death. The books that I were reading was basically describing life as nothing but a preparation for death. Our whole life is basically like an egg, an embryonic state to prepare us for death, which is our actual birth. And so basically the only thing worthwhile in our life is getting to know that aspect of yourself, the only aspect of yourself that survives death. Because after death, this is going to be replaced by a different scene. You know, this stays the same, this goes away. So this dies. This doesn't die. This is the undying. So this part of you has never died. It can never die. But the part that you're seeing, that dies. And if that's all you're familiar with, then that's gonna be an existential death. That's why you have to draw your attention here to get familiar with something that's not going to die. Or if we flip it around to my thing over here, I said all there is aware space. The aware space, by its very nature, is going to be attracted to itself, creating this little, hologram, or this little, what do you call it, virtual reality world. But the only thing real, if you notice, is the space, is the aware string. So that's the part that we have to get to know. Get in here, you no need to get to know anything inside there. And by the way, that's where the sense of I is, that's where the sense of observer, everything is, any sense of thinking is in there. That's why your body's in there. Everything is in there. Get to know that. Get to know this. This is the only thing. So when you die, this thing just becomes flattened again. And you want to get to know the thing that stays. So anyway, going back to the Buddhist thing, Buddhists describe life as just a practice for death. So I looked at it when they told the story. When I'm hearing the story that life is a preparation for death, I was visiting it like life is like a high dive. So your whole life you're walking up the high dive of a diving board just to prepare for that one opportunity you get when you get to swan dive off that diving board and get to do your dive. And that's your one moment when you get death that affords everybody the one opportunity of the flash of Rigpa. That's what the Buddhists describe as a flash of light will appear for everybody. And the more likely you are to recognize it, the more you recognize to flash with the Rigpa, recognize your true nature and not go back to the cyclic wheel of existence. But if you don't recognize that light, then there you go. Now you're going to get attracted to whatever's most attracted to your mind. And like I said, the way the mind works, your mind knows you more than anything. So that's all the death experience is going to be, is your mind playing tricks with you, knowing you more than anything. All your things. So now I want to go back to the salvia experience, because this is what I experienced. When I experienced death through the salvia, that's exactly what I experienced. It was like going down. Oh, by the way, the reason I just thought about this, because I haven't had this experience in almost 30 years. The reason I thought about it was because we always have this YouTube channel I've told everybody on, where a lady's reading Dzogchen. So it's always on our TV. And one day it was, I think it was Ramana Maharshi or Nisargadatta, it was one of those two. And they were giving a talk, and on the talk, they had a picture of I had to Google to find this out, but it turned out to be Dante's picture of heaven. And so we're in bed and we're watching this. My wife points to the picture and she says, "What is that?" So I had to get up because I have horrible eyes, and I look at the TV, and it's exactly what I saw on salvia. So I don't know if anyone's seen Dante's Heaven, but basically it's just a bunch of rings, a whole bunch of rings, but instead of devils, they're angels. So a whole bunch of rings. And then when you get to at the end of the tunnel of the rings is, and he doesn't describe it, but it's the void. At the very end, it's the void. But he just has an end. So it's like a whole bunch of concentric circles, and all the concentric circles come together that you could just see as a singularity. And I know it's the void, but the picture just, has a singularity. But anyway, so when she showed this picture, I was, it reminded me of the salvia experience with death. So here's the experience that I had. So when you do salvia, you lose the sense of self, you lose the sense of who you are, don't even remember being a human, don't remember being anything. And by the way, you're not even inebriated. You're not intoxicated, inebriated. Your mind is not adjusted at all. It's just, you're not there. It just takes away the sense of you. So when I did this, there was no me, and I'm going down this tunnel that is exactly like Dante's heaven. Exactly like that. You're flying down this tunnel super fast, and to the left and to the right of the tunnel, where he has angels pictured. So there's all these different concentric levels of angels going down. So to the left or to the right. So I'm flashing down this tunnel, and to the left and to the right, you just sense life, just like you would in your periphery. If you're going down the tunnel and there's activity to the left and to the right, there's all this infinite activity. And what happens is your mind gets attracted to the activities that resonate with your mind. So for me, the experience was I'm flying down the tunnel to the left and to the right, where he has pictures of angels. What I would see was, poof, come inside here. We could show you the secret to the universe. They'd be like, oh my God, of course I'd like to see the secret to the universe. But you can't. The whole thing is you can't get seduced into any of these things. So all there's going to be, so Dante's pictures all these angels, and I guess that's what is, they're seducing you. Come in here, we're going to give you this, we're going to give you this. So your mind knows you more than anything. So my mind is unwilling. It's like, oh my God, you've always wanted to know the secret to this. Come in here, we'll show you the secret. Or come in here, you can have this. So there's all these infinite pools because it's your mind coming undone, the spiral of your mind coming undone. And it could be attachments to your family, to, like I said, just secrets to the universe, whatever your mind is, whatever your deepest, darkest desires, secrets, fears, whatever they are, it's unspiraled, undone, out in the open. And when you're going down this spiraling tube, your job is to not get attracted to any of these, to not get seduced by any of them, because they are tempting as hell, because it's you. They're all of your temptations. So you're sliding down and you feel the pull to the right. Come over here, we'll show you this. Come over here, you see this. And there's just these attractions, and you just, and so basically the Buddhist experience prepared me for this, because basically the Buddhist take on this is you have to prepare yourself that when you go through death, so let's say you die, when you're dying, you have to prepare yourself to treat your death just like the meditation of your whole life. So the meditation that we're doing our whole life, the meditation that we're doing now, the only meditation that we're doing is just to recognize that everything we see are just appearances of the mind. That's it. That is our practice. Our practice is to recognize the world for what it is. And what it is it's our mind, it's imagination. So that practice continues in death. As above, so below. So that same practice that you've been practicing for your whole life is not buying anything, not believing anything, not taking it to be real. That practice is a preparation for death, for the same thing. You can't take anything in death for real too. So basically you have to take the attitude of whatever appears in death, you have to engage it with the same mindset you do in life. Is it's just an appearance of my imagination. I don't believe it. It's just my mind, more imagination, more dream. And so the experience for me, like I said, you're going down a tunnel, you're going real fast, and all these things are different opportunities to pull you in. So what it will do is, let's say you're flying down the tunnel and you're not taking any of these attachments and you're not becoming attached. All of a sudden the tunnel will open up and say, and it'll show Buddha, or it'll show God or Jesus, whatever your mind is. It'll say, congratulations, Mark. You did the non-attachment. You made it to the end. Welcome to heaven. And no, you have to do the same thing. This is a product of my mind. Once again, if a God appears before you and says, congratulations, you made it. You did all the non-attachment. Now you get to enjoy the spoils. You have to do the same thing. Just my imagination, just my mind. And the reason you have to do, like I said, even in the most grandest, most thing that you could imagine of even the gates or Buddha presenting itself, is because it is your mind. You have to understand it's your mind. And besides, even if it's not, then the Buddha is not going to go away, or the Jesus is not going to go away. But the point is, you have to recognize everything's a part of your mind, and it will go away. And if it doesn't, then then that's where you land. Then that's exactly where you land. And I guess landing in the spot of the Buddha and the Jesus would be a bad spot anyway. But the point is, even that is just a part of your mind. But anyway, so what I experienced when I did not follow any of the attachments was finally, as you're going through all the tunnel, it just spits you out into just pure space, pure outer space, to where you are the outer space. There's not you in space, just pure outer space. Not even void, not even anything, just inactive space. But anyway, what was my point of all that? We were talking about death. Oh yes, here we go. So the reason, by the way, this all started because the word that we're talking about is annihilation. Everything that I just described is the process of annihilation. So that's why the Zen Buddhists have an expression saying, don't fear the void. I know the void seems horrible and annihilating, but there is no actual void. The void is actually the Dharma. The void is actually your mind. So that's why I wrote down the doorway feels like, because on what one side of the doorway feels like the void, feels like annihilation. Once you go through the door, it's no longer void annihilation. And I don't want to skip too far ahead. Wait, hold on a second. But once again, you go through, it is like, yes, okay, that's not blowing. Exactly. But once you go through the doorway, then it's just pure space. So the fear is, so it's the same door. So there's one door on this side, this door is interpreted as fear. But the minute you go through that door, you find out that very door was your freedom. The very door that you're afraid of, that you saw as the void, that was actually your mind. That was actually the Dharma itself, just seen. And that's why they have the expression Zen gates. Once you go through the Zen gates, you realize there was no gates to begin with. And that's why the void is not seen like a void. It's just reality. All right. So now we're going to see the evolution of the word annihilation take on disintegration. So as once again, like I said, all these words seem like the same, but there's a subtle, deep depth to it. So now I go from annihilation to disintegration, where you get to the other side of annihilation because there's no resistance. All right. So I separated disintegration and annihilation basically based on my, let's say, physical experiences, just how I experience the void. So at first would be the feeling of annihilation, because like I said, you're feeling like you're suffocating. Well, let's go back to the order. You feel like you're dying. Why is dying scary? Because it feels like you're suffocating. Where's suffocating taking you? It's taking you to annihilation. But what's on the other side of annihilation? Now all of a sudden we bring up the word disintegration. And I say disintegration because there's no resistance. At least for me, when I hear the word disintegration as opposed to annihilation, disintegration is effortless. Annihilation seems to me something you would see heading into the propellers. When you're heading into the propellers, it looks like certain annihilation. But once you're in the propellers, I just find the word disintegrating to be more peaceful. It's almost like you're in it. It's disintegrating. You're past the void, you're in the void, and now it's disintegrating. Maybe this is what the Hindus mean when they say your head's already in the tiger's mouth. You've already gone too far. Now you're disintegrating. It's no longer annihilating. Now you're feeling the feeling of disintegrating. And for me, it's a more pleasant word. It's a much more pleasant, not so threatening word as annihilation. Annihilation, you're clearly on the other side of the void. It's horrible. Disintegrating, like I said, it doesn't feel so bad. You're in it. You're disintegrating, which brings us to the next word, which is dissolving. And now at this point, dissolving, it's all a good word because you're dissolving into space. As you're dissolving into space. So that very same word of annihilation, settling into it, realize it's just disintegration. And settling into it even deeper, you realize it's just dissolving. It's just dissolving. I guess analogy that I use by the dissolving when I try to explain what I mean the dissolving. Basically, what I mean by the dissolving is anytime you try to look for you, anytime you try to look for the world, you're going to find the void. Pure dissolving. Behind you right now is pure unmanifest. Pure dissolving. Right in front of you, all kinds of manifest. Behind you, dissolving. Pure dissolving. And the way I describe the dissolving is to get a feel for it, like a kind of a feel in your mind. Just picture a surface that's so hot that if you were to take a pat of butter, it could never reach the surface because it would melt before it gets to it. It dissolves before it reaches the surface. That's the feeling I'm talking about when I'm talking about backing up into the dissolving. It could never reach the surface because the more you reach back, it dissolves. It never reaches. It never gets there. So just picture hot butter, putting it on a hot surface, and it can never even reach the surface because it's what that surface is just pure dissolving. So it could never even meet. Again, these are physical things that I think should communicate the subtle differences between annihilation, disintegration, and dissolving. Which takes us to the last word in this little section, and then I'll open up for questions, is black hole. That's basically the word that lately I've been using to describe this, what's behind us, the void. And the reason I use black hole is because we already have a black hole in our dictionary or in our brains for knowing of something that doesn't exist. A black hole doesn't exist. It's just pure dissolving. It's not a thing. There's no thing called a black hole. It's just dissolving. And the result of the dissolving is what we call a black hole. But there is no black hole. There's just dissolving. What we see is the result of the dissolving, which is a black hole, an absence. And the reason I also write down black hole is because nothing could reach it. That's the thing about the hot butter. That's what I realized when I was trying to describe the hot butter and it can never reach the plate, it melts. Same thing about the black hole. Nothing could ever reach it. Nothing could ever escape it. It's nothing but pure dissolving. So that is going to take us to the very last thing. And I don't even know what time we got, 1:15. So if no one has questions, I'll just do the last three. But if someone has questions, since we're going to, it will be 3 parts. I did the first part. That was the second part. But since we are so late, if no one has questions, I'll go into the third part. But if anyone does have questions or comments about either the path, I don't know. I want to say the relationship, the dynamic of dying, suffocating, annihilating, disintegrating, dissolving, and then black hole. So any comments or things on that before I go to the last section? No, all right.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Boris.
Sorry, I don't want to derail you if there's not much time, but I just
No.
wanted to clarify something. I like the way that you sort of worked your way from annihilation to dissolution or whatever, because it sort of feels like you're moving away from a sort of active, doing of something to something that is simply, let's say, spontaneous. And this is my sort of discomfort with the sort of teachings that of the death of something, about something that will die, that will be killed, so to speak, is that it seems to be a product of a belief that there's something substantial that is being dealt with, that there is a something there. And my experience is that what's revealed or just becomes obvious is that it was never there in the first place, right? So the whole analogy when people talk about that it's like Santa Claus, that it's not that you finally figure out who Santa Claus is, it's that you realize Santa Claus never existed. And I think that when you were talking about it, it reminded me of sometimes those teachings are very prevalent and people get very focused on those things, and they're figuring out, how do I die? Like, how do I kill this thing that's such a nuisance, this self or whatever, this source of suffering? And that can seem like that should be the path. That's what you're trying to do. And so a lot of teachings focus on that and methodologies for that. And I think maybe one of the correctives of that is when someone came along and said, no, you're already this, or it's already this way, right? That there is nowhere to go, there is no path, right? And people get agitated by that and think that that's that person is just bypassing, or they're but you still have to do something. Telling me that doesn't help me, right? And I think that the reason that probably came about, at least as far as I can think about it, is that that path of like the killing of the self, or that death, sounds like it's in the realm of escapism, that finally I'll be rid of this thing that is so torturous. And there, it can become obvious that there is no escape, right? And so, the idea of escaping from something just becomes ridiculous. And so, to me, that sounds like why that sort of corrective pointer came about, that it's not that you're going to go somewhere that's wonderful and beautiful and whatever. It's that you'll realize that you were never in that place that was so whatever you're against.
Yeah.
Thanks.
No, I appreciate that. And I think the main point that you're pointing out is that dying, yes. Okay, so if you notice, Boris, the feeling of dying is how it starts off, and then gradually it gets into dissolving. So basically, Boris is basically just saying in a better way when I was trying to say there's a doorway. So it looks like death on one side of the door. Once you cross it, you see it wasn't what you thought anyway. What you thought was the void or death of this thing that you think is a death is only seen that from perspective of the self. But once you cross that doorway of the self, then you see that there is no dying, and it's not even the correct thing to look at it. But so I want to actually pick up on that point to bring this back to Nagarjuna, because what Boris is pointing out is, from his perspective, he does not see the dying anymore, because he sees his true nature and there is no dying. So he sees that. Okay. And the reason I'm saying that is because I feel the same way about Boris when people would, let's say, use the word illusion. So for a long time, you'd hear the world's an illusion, the world's an illusion. And once I saw the world for what it really was, just like Boris, I was no longer comfortable with calling the word an illusion. I was like, no, it's not an illusion. It's only an illusion if you think it's something outside you, if you think it's, something else. If you know what it is, which is just clear white light, it's not an illusion. You see what it is. It's just pure white light. It's pure awareness. So I see what Boris is talking about, but that's why I love Nagarjuna. So so if Nagarjuna was in a room with me and Boris right now, and we were to take up, let's say, my contention with illusion, and I would say, somebody is telling me that the world is an illusion, and then I'm coming in and I'm saying the world is not an illusion. Nagarjuna would hit it right by saying it's not that it's an illusion, it's not that it's not an illusion, and it's not that it's both an illusion and not an illusion, and it's not that it's neither an illusion or not an illusion. So going back to Boris's point, I would apply that to what we're talking about, and I forgot what, oh yeah, the death. So it's not that there's a death, but it's not that there's not a death, and it's not that there's both a death, and that there's neither a death. And the reason why is because you always have the appearances. You always have to account for the appearances. Ultimately, there's nothing, but we do have appearances. And that's why we have the it is and it isn't, because we have to account for the appearances. There is the realm of appearances, and then the realm of actuality, of reality. So going back, yes. So going back to what Boris was talking about, the ultimate truth is always not going to be either the world's an illusion or not an illusion. It's either both, neither this nor that. It's always deeper than simply either being an illusion or not an illusion. Or we could plug in what Boris was talking about, death. It's not that there's a death or not a death, or both a death and not a death, or neither a death. There's the appearance of a death, but the death, as we know, there's no such thing as death. It's just transformation. It's just change, but yet there's an appearance of death. Oh, never mind. All right. So before we move on, do you have anything to say about that, Boris? Because I appreciate you adding these insights, and I want to make sure we tie it up.
Yeah, I think the way you summarized it makes a lot of sense, so to speak.
And if you notice, you offered me the opportunity, Boris, to bring it right back to the bigger point that you brought up, which is the unknowing, the unknowable. And that's what I love about Nagarjuna, and that's why I love that formula we just did. It just points to, it's more important for it to not necessarily be illusion or not illusion than for it to be illusion or illusion. It's more important. The deeper truth is it's not this, it's not that, and it's not neither. And for you to see that for any concept, whether we're talking about death, whether we're talking about illusion, the ultimate truth is always going to be the unknowable, which is that it's not necessarily this or that, because, like I said, of the realm of appearances. All right. So thanks for that, Boris. You're invaluable. All right. So now we're going to get to the third part. So the first part was basically the base. That was impermanence, groundlessness, selflessness, and ungraspable. Once you get that, then the path becomes the dying. And then the dying slowly evolves to the point that what Boris is talking about, you find out it's not dying. And that's why the last word I have is black hole. And it comes back to now the third stage, which is the result. So if the first part was the base, what it is, the second part was the path, what it does, that's the path of dying. And now we get to the fruit. So now we get to the fruit of recognizing what used to be the black hole or the void or the scary annihilation to be what it actually is. So now we're going to pick up on the final three words. The first word of the final three words is void. And once again, it's just a subtle graduation from the word black hole. But the reason I used void is because the void is, well, I kind of already jumped ahead of this earlier. The void is seen not just as the destroyer, the annihilator like the black hole, but it's also the field of the Dharma, yourself. And that's what I jumped ahead earlier when they said, don't be afraid of the void. We know the void is very scary, but don't be afraid of the void because the void is actually not a void. And that's what Boris was talking about, this thing of seeing the grinding death of dissolving in front of you. That's only from that perspective. Once you pass through it, then you could see that the void was actually just you. It was actually the clear space that you're looking for the whole time. It was actually the realm of the Dharma, of the wisdom that you were seeking in the first place. That is what the void is. That is what the annihilation is the very space that you're seeking. Okay, which brings us to the second to last word, which is space. And that is all where my mind has been for the last, couple months, is just that everything is equal in space. Space is the equalizer. Recognizing space, recognizing the space in the world lets you be able to see that all things are equal in space. If you could see the space in the context of everything, then all things are equal in space. And that is what used to be scary. That is the other side of the dissolving. That was the thing that your mind was afraid of, is that all things are equal in space, because that is now the land of what Boris was talking about, of total relaxation, where you're truly not trying to add anything, truly not trying to modify anything, and recognizing that all things are equal in space. War, famine, starvation, everything is equal in space. And that's the scary part, because we want to have specifics. We want to have not just specifics, but specifics in a specific way, ideas and beliefs. And that's what the space is no beliefs. Going back to the unknowing, that's all space is, no beliefs, unknowing. And seeing the equalness of all things in space. Which brings us back to the final word, which is a word, I don't know if I made it up, but just aware space. The final thing. So what starts out as impermanence and goes through the dying and dissolving and black holes and void and space, ends up the very thing that impermanence was based on is just aware space. Just pure aware space. And the reason I separate aware space from space is for the same reason that I like Dzogchen, that will never use the word emptiness without clarity, whereas most teach, or at least the Zen teachings that I also like, they'll just speak of emptiness, which is fine, but that added nuance of clarity in emptiness just gives a much more accurate picture of what emptiness is, because emptiness is not just a normal emptiness. It's a active with potential. It's a potential, like the void. right back there. It's the void of potential. So you can't say it's just, oh, and okay, so here's an example. What makes this void bend? That's the active part. That's the clarity part. So if there was just void, this would never bend. But there's an aware aspect to it. There's a clear aspect to it. There is a lucid aspect to it. There's an active aspect to it. And that in the inseparability of the space and the active part is what's going to make awareness, the aware space, attracted and aware of itself as an other. So finally, we come back to seeing that in aware space, everything arises from aware space and everything arises or falls back into aware space. So just like your suffering in your ignorance arises from this aware space, so does your liberation. So does your freedom. So, well, and that's the last thing I have. That's ironically the last thing I had written down was ignorance arises and liberation arises from this aware space. It's all happening in the safety of aware space, which is why, once again, going back to what Boris was saying, I could exchange the word imagination and say everything has happened in the safety of imagination. That's the function of awareness, is to imagine. So anyway, I just thought that would be fun to start with. Like I said, these were 13 spooky words. They're supposedly spooky words, but when I wrote them down, I noticed if you rearrange them and put them in order, you see that there's a story being told. And the story being told is our life, is this experience, is us recognizing our impermanence, recognizing our groundlessness, which eventually leads you to see your selflessness. And your selflessness is ungraspable. And that makes you feel like you're dying. And the dying feels like you're suffocating. The suffocating feels like you're annihilating. The annihilating feels like you're disintegrating. The disintegrating feels like you're dissolving. The dissolving feels like you're dissolving into a black hole. Then the black hole feels like it's a void. And when you see the void is just space, and you see that you're still there, that's you, aware space. So that's the whole story in a nutshell, everybody. So happy Halloween. And what was once scary is not so scary. Now we can embrace the scary. Now we can see that we can embrace the scary. So yeah, thank you everybody for that. It's an hour and a half, so I'll end it there just for, you know, neatness' sake. But if anybody does have any comments or questions, I'll take them. But that's it. And thank you everybody for coming. I appreciate that. And oh, and if you want to, I do have talks. If anybody wants to go to my YouTube channel, just type in my name, Mark Levitt, on YouTube. I also got a website, This Aware Space, but just type in my name on YouTube, and I got a discussion I do once a month, a group discussion. Anybody wants to participate to. So yeah, just type in Mark Levitt on YouTube. You could join me there. And I'm seeing, oh, never mind, I saw a chat. Yeah, thank you everybody. I hope people haven't been chatting to me. I just noticed it down there, but thank you everybody. Everybody's saying thank you, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, happy Halloween, everybody.
Hey, Mark, thanks. That was great. Another great session. And we're looking forward to not only the other things you do, which you'll be alerting us, but you're coming back next month and every month.
Yeah, now November, just to let you know, I may not be able to. I don't know what dates they have available, but I'm going to New York for a week, and then we have Thanksgiving. I'm definitely going to be available. I make myself anytime you guys will have me. I would be happy to be here. I'm just letting you know, if you don't see me in November, it just means because November.
Well, you know, we get updates every week, so we'll.
Yeah, you keep me. You give me opportunities, and I'll take them. I appreciate it.
Michael C has a question. If you
Oh
want
yeah.
to take it.
Hey, Michael C.
Michael C, go ahead.
Good morning, Mark.
Good morning.
Talk this morning. I have a question when you're talking about Dante's heaven
Yes.
and how as you go descend or ascend, and there's so many attractive things along the way. In the Tibetan teachings of the dead, of the Bardo process, you want to avoid the comfy ones, and you want to go toward the scary, demonic, bright lights. That's where you reach a breakout of cyclic existence.
Yes, and I would say for me, the scary thing was the continuing. That is the scare. The scary thing was to continue on that black hole, just going down the tunnel. It would have, all these things were like little lifeboats being sent out to you, like you're describing. All these little pleasure things are being sent out. The scary part is not taking any of the bait, but continuing. So I just wanted to interject that, but continue, Michael.
So that's kind of what that, I think it's, now my memory is sometimes, not sometimes, my memory is fuzzy, but I think it was described as, in the Tibetan teachings, go toward the bright white light, the scary, the big sound, go toward that. And is that what you're describing? Just keep going?
Yes. Yes. And the scariness is the keep going. That is the keep going, because like I said, it's a vacuum, and you know, nature abhors a vacuum, or is that the expression? But that's a vacuum. That is the terrifying part. The terrifying part is not getting seduced into any of the visions, any of the attractions, which are probably the bardas. I imagine that's what that is all these attractions. Because like I said, it's just your mind undone. So your mind is the bardas. That's your mind. And that's why they appeal to you. So yes, the scary part was the staying on the center, going towards the light. But I will say though, I didn't experience it as light, just a tunnel, and at the tunnel was complete blackness, not light, but still the same concept of a singularity. But I want to go back to what you're saying. The scary part is staying and not succumbing to any of the attractions. So the scary part is the traveling, because you can't, the traveling part's happening on its own. You're just flying down the tunnel on your own, and all these opportunities are being afforded to you. And the scary thing is not to take anything, just to not take anything. That is the scary part, to sit in that vacuum and to not take anything, to all these worlds developing and creating and manifesting in front of you. The scary part is not to take any of those.
And so one last little bit on this. Did you say that this was the experience you at one time had when you took the death simulating drug?
Yes, salvia divinorum. Yes, yes.
Would you or Gary spell that in chat, please?
He did. Yeah, Gary did spell that. Yes, and you can spell it again.
Spell it again. I'll do it again.
I'm glad he can, because I can't.
Okay. And so that lasted like 5 minutes?
It only lasted 5 minutes. Yeah, yep. And you know, it was legal. It may even still be legal in your state. It's not a it's not considered like a recreational thing that our kids are doing. It's very, if you Google it, you'll find out people talk about very terrifying. It simulates it. But anyway, if you're serious about it, Google it, research it, because the people that will talk about it, they'll advise you how to do it. You have to do it in a dark, simulated place, just like the shamans. You know, it's to be taken seriously. But that's what it's for, is to simulate the absence of you. Everything's there but you.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
I just wanted to say hi, Mark. It's Hannah.
Hi,
I
Hannah.
haven't talked to you in a while. How you
Yes.
doing?
I'm doing good, thank you. Happy Halloween.
I only popped in the last half an hour, so I missed some of the context, but I wanted to tell you a couple things. One, I had friends staying at our house, and I had both of your books, and one of my friends was just like, you know, when he left, he's like, can I borrow this for a while? And then when we got together, he's like, would you bring the second book, please? Like, of all of the books that I have, he connected most with your books. So I just wanted to, he liked how straightforward they were, sort of no BS. He really enjoyed them.
Wow, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And thanks for letting me know that. I really do appreciate that. Thank you, Hannah.
Yeah. And also it was funny because I was multitasking a little, listening, and I was really hungry. So I was making myself kind of brunch, and you were talking about the melting butter just as I was melting butter. So I don't know if you saw, but I flipped my screen around and I had a picture of butter melting, which was just what was happening as you were talking about dissolving and melting. And
that's no accident.
Anyway.
That's no accident. That's reality letting you know this is indeed your imagination.
yeah.
That's
Well, I had a question too. So when you're talking about this kind of progression, are you speaking about it in terms of a sort of a formal experience of like sitting meditation on retreat type of thing? Or is this more just the gradual process that we encounter over
Yeah,
time?
you know what though? I would say both. I would say
Okay.
both. I would say both. For me, I was describing more like a year-long process, a more, really years long. But I think especially if you were to do a week-long intensive, absolutely. I think you would definitely be able to blast through that second category of dying, suffocating, and you could probably do that with one meditation sentence in one session. You know what I mean? So absolutely, that would apply. And good point, Hannah, because now that I'm thinking about it, that could actually apply for any really good meditation session. That could happen in any single. I didn't think about that, but you're right. That is both. I wasn't thinking about it as both,
Yeah.
but that is both. Yes, thank you. Yeah, I didn't realize that.
Well, it's interesting too, because in the last year, particularly in sort of the later summer months, there was a tremendous amount of, out sort of like in the dream, in the experience of things unfolding, so much depth and so much processing. Like, my first meditation teacher, who's only 74, has advanced Alzheimer's, and or dementia, and I spent 9 days with her, just sort of taking in what that means. And then with her husband, and just a series of losses and memorials. And it was like there was nowhere to turn, because death was everywhere. And it's just interesting that, reality can sometimes do that, like the melting butter.
Yeah.
It's just sort of infusing experience sometimes.
Yeah. And that's the way I see it, Hannah. I see this as just like a virtual reality program where it's just your mind. And the more you're in tuned to this, the more it's going to mirror that and show you these synchronicities, just because of the nature of what it is just a mirror reflecting. So the nature of it, the more you start to notice it, the more you're going to notice these kind of like the feeling that it's a small world, because that's basically what it is. You're just seeing, wow, it really is a small world. And what I mean by that, it's just a black hole. You know what I mean? It's your world. So it's small because it's your world. It's a co-creation of all the different experiences you have in your unconsciousness in relationship with your, let's say, your fears or your ability to process that which you're experiencing, and you're watching it all unfold in slow motion. And that's why the more you're in tune with it, that you're noticing these synchronicities, because that's all there is. Like that said, that sloping thing, you're naturally being sloped. That's the only direction to go in. So yeah, congratulations. Oh, you're on mute, just to let you know you're talking, but you're on mute.
Oh, just water flows downhill. But yeah, also what came up while you were talking was just the term singularity came up a lot. And there's something on Insight Timer called the Falling Leaf Meditation. It's quite a beautiful meditation, in some ways traditional sort of Vipassana style in introduction, but the fellow who created it is a musician, and he created it for his mother as she was dying. And it sounds, from the way it is, like she was, so this is me free associating basically, but it sounds like that moment when you're confronted, you're in tremendous pain, and projects are unfinished, and you don't want to let go. Like, I think that sounds like the situation his mother was in when he created this meditation. And I don't know what he does with the music in it, but something that is utterly, at least here, wrenching at a certain, maybe 3/4 of the way through. And it just feels like a sort of a Bardo practice or something. So I just say that too, because it's quite beautiful and relaxing. And then and then it's like, oh my God, like it's just about the pain of the separation experience that happens in the dying process that is also being held as illusory at the same time, but and then the singularity piece is just, when I'm in the bath and I look at the drain, when I'm draining the bath and the way it just goes like that can be a meditation. And then something about the heart center and singularity. I was recently doing like a Harish Tantrika Institute meditation I was like, oh, it's like the drain in the tub. It's just like this vortex I don't know, vortex means other things in this community, but yeah, just like sucking the whole thing back into the singularity. And when you talk about possibility, those are just some of the things that came to mind, in case that's helpful or interesting to anybody.
No, it is. And also you brought up the opposite effect of the same thing too. So I was talking about how you can start attracting these synchronicities, but also once you start to engage the real seriously, that's also when you're going to stir up things that hardships will arise. I've noticed that with my life and with my wife or anybody I've talked to, the minute you start to really engaging the stillness, the silent aspect of ourselves, sometimes that's when things could fall apart. That's when sometimes your world could come to hell. That's when sometimes you get challenged. And that's why I kind of like I don't know if it's a Christian expression. I imagine it's Christian, but it says, God only gives you what you can handle. But I think there's a truth to that once you open yourself up to that, once you open yourself up to, let's say what it is, it's being a servant, it's being a host, it's being open, it's being of service. Hardships are going to find you because, going back to the Christian thing, that's what you're doing. You're strengthening yourself. And it goes back to that invisible game that I was talking about. Oh, you weren't there for the invisible game, but I was saying there's two games. On the surface, there's a game where everyone's trying to win, but underneath, you play a different game where you're just trying to lose your attachments. So you use every opportunity as an opportunity to lose your attachments. So while they're getting points and getting fat and getting, sinking themselves on an anchor, you're getting lighter and more buoyant. So you're playing a different game. But anyway, it becomes about just losing attachment. Now I forgot my thought. Oh yes, but life will start to hand you these hardships because that is the whole purpose. The whole purpose is to lose attachment. And that's the way you practice losing attachment is to have these hardships that you could surrender, that you could don't have to try to fix, that you could allow them to be, that you could see them as okay, see your suffering as okay, or see, whatever the hardships are, that they are okay, because once again, all things are equal in space. If you see the space, then you see that all things are equal in space. So I forgot how to sum that up, going back to your point. Oh yeah, that's what I wanted to add, is not only will you start to notice all the synchronicities, but also that's when, and I hate to use the word tested because it sounds like, someone, like there's a program where you're being tested, but like you said, it's just water finding its own level. We're gravitating
nature.
It's exactly right. And nature abhors of X, it's going to fill it up. So, well, thank you, Han. I appreciate that.
There's an expression I heard recently. I don't remember where it's from. Probably some, great teacher or something said it, but that being born is stepping on to a sinking boat. Like just the act of being born, you're just going down.
I love
so it's almost like it starts even before you have language. You're already sinking, and then maybe you just become conscious of it.
That's great.
And maybe all that's happening here is Hannah's in midlife, and her older generations are starting to die, and COVID, and they're just like, oh my God, it's not going to get better from here in terms of the amount of people that are gonna die around me, and just that loss. Anyway,
It's
but you were
beautiful.
talking about a different form of death, I know.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But like you said, it's all a microcosm or a macrocosm. Just like with the things that I listed, I was looking at them as a macrocosm, but as you pointed out, absolutely, they could be a microcosm. And as I thought about it, wouldn't even necessarily have to be a weekend retreat. It could be a single good meditation going through all that. So it was a good point.
Now, another question, and if anybody else has questions or comments, I will stand down because I just
The
Michael
only thing I want to
C.
do is stop the recording so it doesn't go too long because people might think it's too
Yeah.
daunting. So I'm going to stop the recording, but we can continue as long as we want
Go
to.
ahead.
I'm just going to stop.
Thank you, Gary.
Because this is like going on to 2 hours. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Gary.